Welcome to this week's Hydrogen Full Compressed, a global interview series where we cut through the buzz of what's being called the new oil of the 21st century. Our guest this week is Hussein Fouad Al-Ghazzawy. Hussein has over 30 years experience working in the oil and gas industry for Schlumberger, major oil service provider, and is currently serving as a senior energy and industry consultant. He's also a member of the board of several energy and industry companies. Hussein, welcome. And I'd like to start this interview by asking you about the growing role of oil companies in the hydrogen production. We've seen like many international oil firms, national oil companies from the Middle East and North of Africa, increasingly getting involved in advancing their green hydrogen production capabilities. Can they actually play a role in this area?
I think thanks for having me. I think definitely the E&P companies will be important and will be actually crucial to be part of that. I don't think we will be able globally to meet all this demand without the E&P companies of oil and gas. And we see that the majority of this company are focusing on obviously the green hydrogen, the renewable resources, all have objectives to change. They have the experience, they have the agility to be part of this energy transition and meet the zero emission by 2050. I'm a living example of that, working in oil and gas, now in the renewable and the green hydrogen. So definitely they will play a very important role.
So many are challenging this view, right? Like in the sense that they're oil and gas producer, fossil fuel producers, that they're part of the problem, as some voices say, but at the same time they're trying to accelerate to expand their renewable energy areas of business. Can they actually contribute some on some technical aspect besides the obviously funding for these projects?
I didn't mean only funding. Experience is there, and frankly, I don't think they are part of the problem. This is a normal transition. This is the energy is changing, the globally changing. We need to lower the carbon emission. There are other, there is hard to abate industry exist, which obviously contribute to the CO2. So there is, yes, funding is one issue. They have a very mature R&D center all over the world, which will work on obviously a lot of innovations with the green hydrogen and the hydrogen and the renewable. It's evolving. So all these companies, they have the, I would say, the infrastructure, the experience, the R&D, the footprint everywhere to be able to be part and crucial part of this energy transition.
And we've seen in the Middle East and North of Africa, especially, that they're referred to as potential future hubs of green hydrogen production, given their natural conditions, the climate in the region, right? Also the available space in countries like from the Gulf, for instance. How's the region taking advantage of these opportunities, and how are these different plans taking shape today in 2023?
With the COP27 were hosted in Sharm el-Sheikh November of last year, where Egypt basically presented Africa in this conference, and of course UAE will host in COP28 this year. I think the region is in a perfect situation. If I talk about Africa, we basically the strategic position of Africa between a high demand place like Europe and also Japan and Southeast and Asia, South Korea. So we basically the proximity to Europe give Africa and North Africa, of course, advantage, the abundance of the renewable. Africa's reach of solar, wind, hydro. Africa is qualified to produce a competitive pricing of the green hydrogen. If we talk about North Africa, and let me take two countries as an example, Egypt and Morocco. Both countries, they have a mature, hard to abate industry, steel, fertilizers, petrochemicals, cement industry, where you will need this renewable and the green hydrogen to, of course, eliminate the CO2 emission from already existing industry. These countries also have a proven track record when it comes to the solar and wind. We have in Egypt, we have the Bimban in Aswan, we have the wind farm in Jabal Zaid Za'farana, Morocco as well with Noor for solar park and their wind. So they have a mature and a proven track record when it comes to renewable. When it comes to policy legislation, both countries have taken steps. Morocco already announced their low carbon strategy in 2021. Egypt has a framework announced in 2022, and the strategy will be done this year. So definitely the region is qualified and taking the potential of the green hydrogen. If I mention a specific example of what happened now and will be concluded in 2023, in Egypt, we have Egypt Green, which is the first ever green hydrogen integrated project in Africa. It was commissioned in November last year, and it will be done throughout 2023, basically using 100 megawatt electrolysis with 260 megawatt of renewable coming from solar and wind. The mix is important. You cannot rely only on one source. And they will produce 15,000 tons of green hydrogen, which will be a feedstock to produce 90,000 tons of green ammonia. So this is a real proven example of the region basically taking the potential and delivering on the green hydrogen prospect.
Certainly, we've seen, for instance, like some years ago, that the focus was already on the broader spectrum of renewable energies. Like, for instance, the Morocco's solar power generation capacity, also in Tunisia, countries like Tunisia, even Egypt. At the same time, the proximity you mentioned to Europe, especially at this point, this time when Europe is facing an energy crisis due to the events related with the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, right? Nonetheless, we've seen, like in Egypt, there seem to be some challenge when it comes to the place where the renewable energies, even green hydrogen, can be developed, and the distance that separates that with the main port facilities that would be used for the export of green hydrogen. How is the country? What is the country doing in that regard, or how are they planning to overcome this obstacle?
It's actually working well, because you definitely spot on. You need to have harmony where you're going to produce the green hydrogen and having the off-taker and export it. I think Egypt and other countries in North and South Africa are in a better position compared to the rest of Africa, because infrastructure exists. The port on Mediterranean and the Red Sea, and also Suez Canal, so where you can have the off-taker, whether it's in Europe from Mediterranean or Japan, Korea, and Asia. And all the majority of the projects are being planned, so where you can have definitely access to what Egypt is planning. They call it the Green Corridor, which will be dedicated only for the renewable energy, and having access, obviously, to Europe, to where the off-takers stand. So when it comes to Egypt, that's definitely all the steps is taking place, but the challenge exists in the rest of other places in Africa, because we still have issues when it comes to the infrastructure in Africa. So again, that will be an issue. Back to Egypt again, fresh water to produce the green hydrogen is definitely a challenge. And part of the plan with the green hydrogen, there is also a lot of desalination plants, because to produce 1 kg of hydrogen, you need 9 equivalent of fresh water. And I think also the technology is evolving as well to allow to use treated water in the future. So that definitely is a challenge. I think also the challenge is the absence of some policy and legislation in countries in Africa, and it's coming. So definitely there are challenges, but I think there's also a plan to overcome these challenges as well.
It sounds like there are different environmental challenges coming together into the production of hydrogen. You mentioned water scarcity, which has been a obviously historical challenge in the region.
Agreed.
And also the desalination. Can this sort of slow down the progress maybe in the green hydrogen production?
I slow down. Let's state some
or put it more or less some sort of obstacle, say, to the plans that have been put in place.
Let's state some obstacle here. We have to understand that in Africa, we still have, especially in sub-Sahara, 580 million Africans don't have access to electricity. Almost 900 millions don't have access to clean cooking fuel or clean cooking gas. So there is definitely challenges and obstacles, but on the bright side, if you look also at the potential of the green hydrogen in Africa, by 2035, Africa can produce up to 50 million tons of green hydrogen, and will take only 3 hubs right now. One of them is Egypt, one of them is Morocco, Mauritania, northwestern hub, and the south, Namibia and South Africa. Of course, North Africa still Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and of course East Africa, they have the potential, but I'm talking about already studies being announced last year. So there is this 50 million ton. The world demand when it comes to green hydrogen will increase by 7-fold, from almost 90 million tons now to over 700 million tons by 2050. So the world will be in need of the green hydrogen. I'm using your platform to encourage investors to come to Africa, financing project in Africa, because I think Africa will play a very important role in having this green hydrogen in the energy mix and in the energy transition for the high demand places, whether it's in Europe or in Asia. So obstacles exist, challenges exist. We see a lot of conferences where Europe, state, Asia are focusing more on working with Africa to overcome, obviously, all of these challenges, because, again, it's very important that the world meet its climate change objectives, because we need the planet to live in. So I think everybody is serious about overcome these obstacles.
It seems when we speak about renewables and also green hydrogen production in Africa, normally the North takes much of the spotlight. You also mentioned some countries like Namibia. Are there other countries or projects across in other parts of the continent that we should be aware of? And what would it take for these projects to eventually take off?
There is a lot of projects. As I said, you have Morocco, Mauritania, you have Namibia and South Africa. Some of the EMP companies are investing in places like Angola for solar park. So we have seen what happened. We spoke about Bimbani in Egypt, 1.6 gigawatt and going to 2 gigawatt. So there is a lot of project when it comes to renewable, and we have seen how the technology evolved in the last 10 years, where the prices of the solar and the wind came down significantly. We cannot ignore, of course, the hydro, the geothermal in East Africa as well. That's another potential of renewable energy. I think each country have to think of the right mix. There are nuclear in South Africa, Egypt talking about also having nuclear. So having the right mix between solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, and the nuclear is the right answer. Each country has its own basically needs and has its own capabilities. I think, and I strongly believe, that Africa is definitely in a good position with the abundance of all these natural resources compared to the other continents. And of course, we have the area. I mean, you need a footprint for all the stuff. We don't have a lack of areas in Africa.
Definitely. You mentioned you compared the case of hydrogen with the one that we've seen in solar power generation. That's a usual parallel that is drawn between both, in the sense that we've seen how solar power, the generation price has dropped over the last recent years, and some are expecting green hydrogen production to follow a similar path. What would it take for this to actually happen?
I think green hydrogen will reach the famous $2 per kilo, hopefully soon. There is a lot of, and again, we are learning when it comes to the green hydrogen. The transport and the storage of the green hydrogen is still a challenge. So that's work on progress. Having, of course, the electrolysis, having a standard electrolysis will definitely help in reducing the cost. We don't want to have too many types. I think the technology need to evolve to have this, to standardize the electrolysis to allow various countries to produce, and also the maintenance, the spare parts. So definitely the technology, the R&D needs to play a very active role. If we were talking 10 years ago, nobody expected the solar and wind to reach to that. So I'm confident in a decade, or hopefully even less, the prices of the green hydrogen will fall down as well. But it requires that the entire world working together. When it comes also to the rare earth metals, and if I speak about the lithium, this is very important mineral you need for the energy storage, because of of course, the wind and the solar. So that's something, again, very important. I see a lot of actions taking all over the world to improve the process of extract basically the rare earth metals, such as lithium, because there is a lot of metals we will need, will be fundamental in the energy transition, energy storage moving forward.
And most of these are mined in the African continent as well. Can you see? Are we seeing that these mining regulations, policies are taking shape in order to benefit from this in a just way?
I think mining in Africa is moving. We see more African countries are definitely moving ahead with mining, whether it's precious minerals, whether it's all this rare earth metals and minerals needed for the energy transition. We see now that technology in the mining industry in Africa, we see more investment. We see even local companies in Africa, whether it's North, West Africa. So there is the in-house experience definitely is evolving, because you need to have to enhance the capabilities and the competency of the people in Africa, obviously, to be part this mining. So no, definitely there is countries, and if I use example Morocco, 10% of their GDP coming from the mining. Of course, you have South Africa, you have Ghana, you have Egypt with the golden Eastern Desert. There are cobalt in Congo. I mean, 70% of the world cobalt production coming from there. So we are rich with the mineral resources, and definitely a lot of improvement in how to extract properly and using the latest technology these resources.
It's good to know that their actions are being taken from the policy perspective, because it seems a bit like this mining debate is a bit of the elephant in the room when it comes to the energy transition. It's a critical part for to develop all the needed infrastructure, but at the same time, it feels like it's somehow left behind. I'd like to go back a bit to this comparison between to the different projects that are taking place in the Middle East and Africa. Obviously, we've seen there are many differences between across countries. For instance, the Gulf states have in that sense, the oil exporting economies that have deeper pockets to carry out these ambitious projects. Are we heading towards a scenario where different countries in the region will collaborate, or rather compete to become these green hydrogen powers or hubs?
I think collaboration is already taking place, and I'll be mentioning example. I think when it comes to the Gulf states and Africa, both are in between the high demand areas, Europe and Asia. So that's already exists. Both have the abundance of the natural resources, solar in the Gulf, but wind additional, and in Africa. Of course, the Gulf states, they have a better situation when it comes to funding, and we see already a living example of a major Gulf organization, whether it's Masdar from UAE or Aqua from Saudi, investing in Egypt, investing in other African countries. So I don't think it is a competition. It's a collaboration working in progress. It is already happening. Knowledge sharing, definitely a lot of knowledge sharing taking place. So again, hard to abate industry exists in this in the Gulf, whether it's fertilizer, whether it's steel industry, compared also to places in Africa. So I think there is a lot of collaboration, and I would say complementing each other's toward, of course, producing more green hydrogen. The off-taker are there, the demand is there. We spoke about report talking about 7-fold of the current green hydrogen. So to produce 7-fold or reach 7-fold by 2050, you need to have a lot of production and people working together.
At the regional scale, what are the main challenges that countries in the region should be aware of that could potentially slow down but it could slow down their goals of becoming strategic hubs for hydrogen production?
We spoke about the fresh water, and the Gulf obviously will have the same issue. I think the Gulf state already, when it comes to legislation and policy, they definitely ahead of other places in Africa. I think also the international standard when it comes to identifying the low carbon hydrogen needs a bit of fine-tuning. We saw with the crisis in unfortunately with Russia and Ukraine, some of the European countries had to go to coal to produce energy, which was not a good solution, but was the only solution. So I think I hope that to see a bit of clarity on the international classification standard of the low carbon hydrogen, allowing basically some rooms where
issues on the standards are these issues on the standards a problem of the region, or it's actually a broader global issue that
no, I think it's a global issue. it's a global issue.
Okay.
So I think that we'll see more clarity, which will help, obviously, because all this project need a lot of investment. It's a long-term investment. So when you do the feasibility study, you need to have a very clear understanding with the standard and the policy to be able to make the right investment in place.
And can we see any sort of benchmark in that regard that could be used to develop additional frameworks or regulations at a regional scale or regional or national scales?
Definitely. And as I said, the demand are there, the willingness exists, the resources exist. I think Europe is, European community is learning from what happened with the gas issue and depending on one source. So I think there is diversifying the sources, working with other stakeholders. So what I have seen also the progress, we spoke about it with the rare earth metal for the energy transition. So I think the whole world is working towards a different benchmark to accelerate all this green hydrogen project. We see enhancing of the awareness. The normal people now, they talk about environment, sustainability. It hasn't become only responsibility of the government. It's everybody's responsibility, because we're living on this earth and we need to reserve it for the generation to come. So I think everybody is moving in the right direction.
I'd like to wrap up this interview by asking more about this last point you made. How are these green hydrogen developments across in Egypt and other countries in Africa perceived by societies in terms of their social and also their environmental impacts?
I think COP27 played a very important role in increasing the awareness of the people and the encouragement, obviously, of having all this green economy project all over the continent. I read a report that basically Africa can add 4.5 million jobs with all this green hydrogen. So that obviously having more foreign investment, attracting more foreign investment. The report spoke about having $125 billion increase in Africa GDP with all this project. So it's a good news. It's the good news for the public, and the public are far more aware of the sustainability. If I take example close to my heart in Egypt, we have almost 14 million households having basically connected to natural gas, which is much cleaner, still CO2 emission, but much cleaner when it comes to change vehicle to be operated by natural gas, and more even electrical vehicle we see in Egypt, in Africa, in Morocco, in South Africa, across the continent. So the awareness is there. It's a culture evolving, and I think we are at the stage of building this awareness and sustainability culture among the public in Africa.
Thank you, Hussein. We'll have to wrap it up here. Hussein Fouad Ghazzawy, Senior Energy and Industry Consultant, thank you so much for your insights today. And follow Gulf Intelligence on social media to stay well informed about the green hydrogen and the energy transition developments. Thank you, Hussein.
Thanks a lot.